Good afternoon from Sacred Space at Titania's Realm. It's 5:18 p.m. on Monday, the 28th of April 2025. So I've had a lovely day. I went to have a visit with my friend Lynn, and then her husband Peter went to pick up their little granddaughter Cadence. And she's so sweet. She arrived at the gate. I'll show you. She said, "I brought you a present, Auntie Tanya." And I'm just thrilled because bear in mind I don't have grandchildren, and I miss having little kids around. You know, it's sweet. So here she is. She gave me this beautiful flower. Isn't she a beautiful child? And all their children are beautiful. And here's me wearing the flower around my neck. Very grateful recipient of the love from little Miss Katie. And then I came home and had some pasta that Lynn sent home with me. And this guy landed on the table wanting my food, cheeky bird. So he permanently now comes and competes with me on the table for my food, which is a bit naughty, but I created that monster by feeding him, so there is that. So I quietly chucked a bit of the meaty components onto the grass to show him you need to eat off the ground, not off my plate, but he doesn't quite get that. Anyway, I had a lovely afternoon, and I'm grateful because I haven't actually been out of the house much at all, so it was nice to have an outing and be blessed with a little visit with little Cadence, who is Tracy's little daughter, Lynn's youngest daughter's youngest child, who is a spitting image of her mother. It's actually quite astonishing how alike they look. I remember when Tracy was that age. So lovely. Really lovely, and it kind of lightened my heart a bit to spend some time, with the child. She tried to teach me some computer game on her little iPad device, but I couldn't quite understand how it worked. So it does show the generation gap is widening with technology now. Things that when my kids were small didn't even exist yet. I think we had Sega Mega Games come out when my kids were a little tiny bit older than Katie is now. But yeah, the technology is amazing, just amazing. It's right over my head, a lot of it. Anyway, I thought I would try and finish off Ghost Stations 2 by Bruce Barrymore Halfpenny, and we're up to chapter 24. Right, I have to edit that, just quickly edit that because I thought we'd already read chapter 24. We'll just fix that, that's a mistake. Right, have to fix that in the previous video. Right, people of Earth. So we'll carry on with chapter 24, The Fickle Finger of Fate. One of my favourite expressions, actually. I first heard about that when I read Cloud Street by Tim Winton. He spoke a lot about the fickle finger of fate, and as a sort of a theme running through that storyline, Cloud Street. A wonderful book. I actually saw it as a stage play as well. Highly recommend. It's very Australian, but what I loved most about it was how he wove in the ghosts in the house and the relationships the ghosts were having with the living people in the house. And I never imagining in my wildest nightmares that might become a reality in my own life one day. I think, when did I see that stage play? I was working at the police academy, and my friend Rosie gave me her ticket. It was a very expensive ticket. I could never have afforded it at that time because although I was working, I was on trainee wages through the government traineeship scheme. and had very little money. So, and then she couldn't go to that play for whatever reason. It conflicted with something. She no longer wanted to go. So she gave me the ticket. And I was just bloody thrilled because, as I said, wouldn't have been able to afford to go there under my own auspices. And I was very nervous about going to a play on my own because I used to always go to my daughter's plays. But then, of course, she'd be there and, see her other actors and people connected to the play. But this was the first time I'd gone to a theatre play on my own without having any connection to my daughter, for example. And I remember going there. I think I took a train in. And honestly, my anxiety, now I would have been 35 at the time if I was working at the Police Academy. Yes, that's correct. And I was just a bundle of nerves. And of course I dressed very, elegantly because it's a theatre and one dresses up for the theatre. And I just walked into the theatre and there were two older women, probably round about my friend Rosie Price's age, about 20 years older than me. And they just saw me walking into the theatre, obviously looking around all anxious and nervous and out of my depth. And I went up to buy a glass of wine or a cup of, was it wine or coffee I got? Anyway, I bought a cup of coffee or something before the play began. And these two women just spotted me. And they said, "Oh, have you come to see Cloud Street?" I said, "Oh, yes, indeed. And I'm terribly excited. I've read the book and it's a fantastic book. It really is. Highly recommend. Reading the book is actually even better, but the play was phenomenally done. It was actually like being there. It was wonderful. So I've never met Tim Winton, but to you, my darling, I've read a few of his books. My favourite is Cloud Street because of the spirituality and the ghosts and, the full families all interwoven. But I've read Breath and, what was the name of the other book I read? It was a collection of his short stories, some of which were quite dark and harrowing. I was reading them to my ex-boyfriend back in the day. And even he was impressed by the writing. Fabulous. He's a fabulous writer, Tim Winton. You are a fabulous writer. But anyway, so these two wonderful women saw that I was on my own and they were like, "Oh, come and join us." Wasn't that kind? Because I didn't know anyone there and I'm used to going to things alone, but it's lovely when people tuck you a bit under their arm and make you welcome and, in a non-threatening, non-dominating, non-smothering kind of way. Anyway, they were a lovely couple of women. I'm not sure if they were actually a couple or, what their relationship was, but that doesn't matter to me. I'm not less bothered by that. But I still remember they were so lovely. Actually, I think they insisted on buying me the coffee and chatting to me about the book. And anyway, we ended up meeting up again, and I don't think we had seats close by, but we ended up meeting up again in the interval. And I was really quite impressed with those lovely women, how kind they were. I went back to the academy the next day and I said, "Rosie," I said, "not only did you give me a free ticket to the play, which was phenomenal, but I met these delightful ladies who were very kind to me." And even she was impressed. And she said, "Of course you did, Tanya, because you're a lovely person and people were drawn to you, and I'm really happy that they were kind and included you and you had a wonderful evening." And I said, "So am I." I said, "You should have seen me. I was sweating nails. I was so anxious." And she said, "Why are you like this, Tanya?" She could never quite wrap her head around why I'm like this. I said, "Oh, my childhood and my anxiety and what have you." But anyway, eventually, by the time I finished that job, in the last 6 months of that job, she kind of understood what was actually going on with me. and again was very nurturing and kind and supportive. Lovely woman. Lovely, lovely woman. I have many happy memories of her mentorship and kindness towards me. So, yes, so how do we get into that story? The title, The Fickle Finger of Fate, which sort of looks like this. Sometimes looks like this. Anyway, I'm joking, but kind of is. I'm kind of a little bit right there in a way. But anyway, let us continue on with the story. We have just seen how superstition was very rife with most air crews. You know, in fact, I think I still have a copy of Cloud Street somewhere. I'm not sure if I still have it or if I gave it away and moved it on, gave it perhaps to my daughter to read. But anyway, if I still have it, I might read that. I might read that to you. That's how wonderful it is and how much I love it. And why not? Why the hell not, people of Earth? So let me just return to that sentence because I interrupted myself midway. We have just seen how superstition was very rife with most air crews. Actually, I think Cloud Street's kind of set back in World War II or Depression years, even further back into the Depression years. I think it was. It went back that far, and I'm not quite sure. Anyway, just before operations, a wrong word could be fateful for the superstitious crew members. This was very much so for Flight Lieutenant Charles Ellis of 469 Squadron, Royal Australian Air Force, based at Waddington in Lincolnshire. I've just realised I've bloody run out of chocolate. That's a crisis when I run out of chocolate. Oh well, I can get some tomorrow. On the night of 1st and 2nd of February 1945, Bomber Command scheduled a raid against the town and marshalling yards at Siegen, just east of Cologne, or in Germany it's called Köln. A total force of 271 Lancasters, of which 22 aircraft were from 467 Squadron, so the Aussies, were detailed for the attack. My regular crew weren't flying that night, said Flight Lieutenant Ellis. Flight Lieutenant Keith Livingston's rear gunner in Lancaster G. George went sick, and as squadron gunnery leader, it was my responsibility to nominate a replacement gunner, and I nominated myself. Because it would be the last trip to complete my second tour of operations, and Flight Lieutenant Livingston's final trip to complete his cruise tour, I jokingly said to Ray Brown, the mid-upper gunner, prior to briefing, with a coincidence like that, we are a moral to get the chop tonight. Ooh, I don't think he should have said that. Anyway, here's my new amulet and lucky charm, gifted literally by the Fae, the top of Charlie's beak, cast in sterling silver. And I've worn it today with great happiness and contentment because I made it, but it was gifted to me. The top half of the beak. And I've been wishing that Charlie was with me for the last few months. And I realised yesterday, as I made it yesterday. Yes, even more spiritual, it's exactly 3 months and 1 day yesterday since her death. So, a bit odd, the synchronicity of the timeline actually matching up completely with her death, that this little piece should have come back to me. And you know the odd thing? Can't find the piece of beak now. Don't know where I put it. I think it might be in the windowsill though. But anyway, couldn't find it for love or money today. Odd, isn't it? Luckily I made it last night and Spirit was at me all day. Make that thing, make that beak, make it now. I'm like, why now? It can happen at any time. Make it now, make it today. And there was a reason for that. So you've got to go with the directives from your guides and angels sometimes and trust that they know why you have to do things in a certain time frame. Otherwise, missed opportunities sometimes. At the briefing, the intelligence officer informed the assembled crews, as was the practice during that stage of the war, not to take risks in the event of being shot down over Germany, as the end of the war was imminent. It's a dreadful shame when people got killed right at the end of the bloody war. My own grandfather died of tuberculosis on the 12th of April 1945, and I think the war in Germany ended on, if I'm correct, the 23rd of April 1945. So he was desperately ill. It wouldn't have made a difference one way or the other, I guess, but it's a shame he didn't get to see the war actually end before he upped and bloody died. But there were many that got killed in those last few weeks, and horrific, just when it's about to be all over. Over Siegen, low unbroken cloud spoilt bombing conditions. However, during the bomb run, the bomber crews aimed at sky markers laid by the Pathfinder force, which rapidly became merged with the glare of incendiaries. Lancaster G. George, with Flight Lieutenant Ellis on board as their rear gunner, made its bombing run and was just pulling out of the target area when the intercom crackled into life. Bomb aimer to skipper, there is a 1,000-pound bomb hung up in the bomb bay. But before the skipper could answer, G. George received a direct hit in the starboard wing, and the starboard engine burst into flames. Just show you this photo before I continue reading. Flight Lieutenant Charles Ellis, second on left, leaning on the propeller. Yes, that would be on the left. It kind of looks like the right, but it is indeed the left. Can we see him? No, it's all blurry. There he is, crisped up a little bit. Right, where were we? The starboard engine had burst into flames. The German night fighter had attacked them without being seen. Charles Ellis had not seen any fighters from his rear turret, so it would appear the attack had come from the front of the aircraft. The Lancaster had, in fact, been hit by a German night fighter using a pair of 20mm cannon mounted in the fuselage and arranged to fire upwards and forwards, which enabled the night fighter to attack from below. This was the blind spot for the bomber crews and an area they could not defend. For Flight Lieutenant Ellis, the attack came as a shock. The next thing I remember is the flight engineer saying, "Where is my parachute?" he said. The skipper called over the intercom and said, "Looks like we've had it, chaps. You'd better bail out." I was wearing a back type parachute and turning the turret got out into the fuselage. Upon going forward, I met the mid-upper gunner who had already jettisoned the escape hatch. The flames from the fire in the engine and probably the wing fuel tanks were streaming down the side of the aircraft. Here's another photo of her. Close-up of Flight Lieutenant Charles Ellis, Royal Australian Air Force. So he was one of our men. Rather a handsome looking man too, I might add. Oh, yummy, yummy, yummy. Not that I usually refer to men as yummy, but when I do, you can take that as a high compliment indeed. Ray Brown said, "You bastard, Alice, you've mozzed us." Mozzed. Wonder what they mean by that. As in mosquitoed? He then turned and disappeared through the escape hatch. I followed suit, and the next thing I knew was a welcome jerk on the parachute harness, which indicated that the chute had opened. While descending, I could still hear Ray, who was of course floating down below me, saying, "You bastard, Alice." I saw the burning G. George pass underneath me, and then it appeared to turn back on another course, and the thought flashed through my mind, hell, the skipper's attempting to fly back to base and leave us in Germany. I was not to know at the time that the skipper was apparently endeavouring to control G. George, but his gallant efforts were to be of no avail as the aircraft crashed and he died with her. Oh, bless. Charles Ellis still had Ray Brown's words ringing in his ears as he plunged into a deep snowdrift. He might be a bastard, but he survived, am I right? Sometimes, if you have to be a bastard, then a bastard you shall be, by the gods. Charles Ellis still had Ray Brown. Oh no, read that. He quickly snapped out of his parachute harness and buried it, together with his parachute and flying suit, in the snowdrift. It was only later that he realised he had left his escape kit in his flying suit. After a cold night spent in a train carriage, Alice was taken prisoner. Over the next 2 days, the remainder of the crew were rounded up, making a total of 7, for G. George had been carrying a second Dicky pilot, and this apparently had satisfied the Germans, for a normal Lancaster bomber crew was 7. After a spell at the interrogation centre in Frankfurt, the crew were then taken to a holding centre at Nuremberg and marched to Stalag 7A, Moosburg, northeast. It's written in Roman numerals, V11A, that's 7A. Moosburg, northeast of Munich, from whence they were eventually liberated by the American Army. The skipper, 155465, Flight Lieutenant J.K. Livingston, DFC, RAF, was killed over Siegen on 1st of February 1945, whilst pilot of Lancaster MG197 of 467 Squadron. He was originally buried at Rengsdorf Cemetery. However, in 1948, his body was transferred to Rheinberg Military Cemetery. Members of the crew who became prisoners of war were 102110 S Leader D.O. Sands, DSO, DFC, RAF, Navigator, 53553, Flight Officer E.G. Parsons, DFC, RAF Flight Engineer, 412818, Flight Officer, so the S should stand for Squadron Leader, Flight Officer W.D. McMahon, RAAF, Bomb Aimer, 182270, P-O, what does that stand for? P something officer. J. Pendergast, RAF, wireless operator. 172986, Flight Officer R.N. Brown, RAF, mid-upper gunner. 418931, Flight Lieutenant E.C. Ellis, RAAF, rear gunner. 432138, Flight Officer RWG Eagle, RAAF, second pilot. Had Flight Lieutenant Charles Ellis put the fickle finger of fate on the crew of G. George, it makes one think. From the 22 crews that set out for Siegen, only Charles Ellis and his crew failed to return. Was it the fickle finger of fate? Let's go back to what he actually said. This is why sometimes we say things without thinking. It's almost like a channeling. It almost pours from our mouth, and later on we think later on, why the hell did I say that? It's come true. You know, it's quite astonishing and often upsetting at times. If you knew that those words were going to manifest as reality, you would have choked on them or bitten them down or swallowed them rather than utter them. But it's almost like the soul knows ahead of time what is going to happen. Let me just try and find the part where he said. Looks like we've had it, chaps. You'd better bail out. No, that came later. Alright, here's where he said it. With a coincidence like that, we are immoral to get the chop tonight. That was the line. It's almost bringing it on their heads. If he'd said it to me, I would have slapped on up the side of his head immediately, try and mitigate the self-proclaimed curse, but sometimes you just don't realise, you know. Chapter 25. If you're going to curse yourself or curse other people, make damn sure you know what you're saying, why you're doing it, by the way. Seriously, when I curse someone, I fucking mean business. It's cost me my friendship, but unfortunately, if that was the undercurrent of all of that, all that evil that actually came from that person, then I don't regret one moment the words I put out. Don't shit on people who've done you no harm, especially a woman who was in love. It's evil and putrescent and ghastly and cowardly, by the way. Right. Chapter 25. The Megalodon Mystery. The 1947 to 1948, in 1947 to 1948, Squadron Leader Harry Payne was serving at Royal Air Force Megalodon in Burma. The station was handed over to the Burmese Air Force when they left in 1948. Megalodon is situated about 25 miles from the city of Rangoon. And for those in the RAF airfield, I'm touching this because it's a timely reminder of the Spirit saying to me, it wasn't kind what was done to me, it was deliberate acts of black magic and putrescent evil, and so the gods gifted me a piece of my little Charlie to remind me that true, real and enduring love, honouring, kind, heartfelt, sincere, is eternal. Megalodon is situated about 25 miles from the city of Rangoon, and for those at the RAF airfield, there was very little to do in this far-flung corner of the world. Squadron Leader Payne was in charge of the Area Control Centre, but there was very little activity, for RAF Megalodon housed only a Dakota squadron plus a few brigands and the odd Mosquito aircraft which were used for weather flights. The whole station was suffering from total boredom. And to ease the boredom, Harry Payne participated in the following incident, the outcome of which he still cannot explain. It was 9 o'clock one Sunday evening, and 4 of us were sitting in our mess lounge bar, he said. There was little to do and we were bored stiff. The 4 of us, Jock, Buck, Fred and I, plus the local Burmese barman, were the only occupants. It was Harry who broke the silence. Has anyone got any ideas on what we can do to pass the time? He asked. They looked at each other as if in deep thought. Then, after what seemed an eternity, Buck asked, have you ever tried out the wine glass and alphabet trick? By that they mean Ouija board, I think. No, they all replied, not having any idea what he was talking about, but being so bored. We were willing to try anything, said Harry. What a way to spend the evening. That can take hours and hours. Is there anyone there? What's your name? And you've got to spell it all out. And you don't know what you're inviting in. This is the problem, people of Earth. I don't recommend people who are not properly credentialed or properly experienced mediums to do the Ouija board. It's not a game and not a parlour trick, even though it's treated as one. It can be very, very dangerous, people of Earth. Anyway, Buck went over to the bar and returned with a wine glass, one with a nice fluted stem and a fairly large circular base. Following Buck's instructions, they got some card on which to print the letters of the alphabet, and while they were busy doing this, Buck told them to make 28 pieces for 2 pieces were needed for yes and no. As soon as they had completed their task, they handed them over to Buck. I hate that name. My mother's last husband was named Buck. Fucking animal that he was. Anyway, where were we? Mustn't get triggered by someone's name, people of Earth. It's hard not to, though. But anyway. They handed them over to Buck, who arranged the letters clockwise, A to Z, around the circular edge of the table. After the Z, he placed the yes and no cards. He then inverted the wine glass and placed it in the centre of the table. Whilst Buck was doing this, the other 3 sat back waiting for instructions. All 3 felt that it was much more than a parlour game and glanced at each other in silence. No one spoke when Buck told them to place their right forefinger on the right-hand side of the base of the wine glass. The reason for doing this, Buck explained, was to stop people cheating by pushing the glass. They all followed his instructions, but at this point, Jock, the comedian of the group, said, "Eyes down for a full house," which brought an instant retort from Buck to keep it serious and let him ask the questions. Dead silence reigned for the longest 2 minutes of my life, said Harry Payne. Then Buck intoned, "Is there anybody there?" And I was tempted to reply, "Yes, 3 other idiots besides you," but thought better of it and restrained myself. Not wise to make jokes when you're doing a seance like that either, or mock and deride the spirits. If you anger them, then they'll let just anyone through. And some of those entities on the other side are, not nice, to put it delicately. As they all concentrated on the wine glass as hard as they could, the local barman looked on with a bemused expression on his face. He probably thought they were all balmy and a few sheets to the wind. Should also not do seances when you're drunk, by the way. You need to be clean and clear. As Buck continued repeating, "Is there anybody there?" Another long silence ensued, and then Fred asked what was supposed to happen. Buck quietly told them that if they all got tuned in, the presence would start to move the wine glass to either yes or no, or to the letters of the alphabet, spelling out a message. I felt a bit strange at this stage, said Harry, and I clearly recall how reverently he said the word presence. Now you will notice in my videos that I have frequently had interruptions from spirits and that I'm quite irreverent, not totally disrespectful, but a bit cheeky to my former lover, David Davidson, based on the fact that he tried to kill me when he was alive many years ago, and I don't owe him too much courtesy and respect, and I don't invite him to come through anyway. He just pops in randomly, like he thinks he's in some Ghost and Mrs. Muir set, and that I'm not always very respectful to him, which I've been told off by other mediums, by the way, but I don't owe him anything. If anything, he owes me big time what he put me and what he cost me and my children. However, you heard me yesterday, was it yesterday or the day before, be quite awful, AWE FULL when I had a presence behind me that I didn't know who that was, and you saw me go a little bit pale and you heard me say, they've run their hand across my back and I don't know who they are and I'm not engaging with them, because if they don't give their name, I don't engage with them usually. Sometimes I do if I feel they're non-threatening, but usually if they don't give you a name, you are not supposed to communicate with them. It's kind of a cosmic law. And you will notice that when I ignored it for a little while and continued reading, that entity then actually said, "Be not afraid, we're here to support you." And I sat up and took notice when they used the plural, because I only felt one presence. But that was a very large energy, and look, it ended up manifesting in me finding my little bird's beak and casting it in sterling silver, and that entity guided me through that process the whole day in making this. So for whatever reason, it was important to that energy or that entity that I obeyed their directives, and that I made this little amulet, and that I had that full-on relationship with them all yesterday. It was a bit astonishing, but you will notice that I was very respectful. I was supposed to be, if not courteous, then at least very, very, respectful, as if you're speaking to someone with much higher status than you, much higher merit than you, and yes, have manners. And sometimes I'm a bit obnoxious to David Davidson when he comes through. You notice he doesn't take offence though, because I've said to him on numerous occasions, if you hadn't performed certain actions against me, I would not have spent 30 years. Well, no, that's not fair. It wasn't 30 years. I only met him in 1998. But anyway, there was, 27 years of trauma that might have been eliminated, and I might have even met a man that was genuine and kind and loving by now and had a wonderful partnership. But because of his actions and the man before him and the few men that came after him, I was so severely damaged that can't trust anyone ever again. So I sabotage. And by the way, they sabotage too when they shove women in my face and are sadistic and cruel. Why would you want that as a woman who's barely survived even worse monsters than they present themselves to be? Why would you want that, people of Earth? I'm far better to stay on my own for the rest of my life. It's lonely, it's a bit sad, and it's frustrating at times, struggling on my own. But it's preferable than being in some kind of a love, vampiric bite connection with someone that is destructive and doesn't wish you well and is so envious that you can't even talk to another male who happened to be an acquaintance. It's ridiculous. I still don't understand what that was about, given he'd already moved on with another woman. He couldn't bear the thought of some man coming up and dancing with me. Like, control freak much? So there's a lot of things about that I still don't understand. A happily married man that he claimed to be doesn't act like a possessive maniac when some other woman who happens to be in love with you engages and communicates with other men. None of it adds up. None of it makes sense. It's all utterly fucking psychotic, if the truth be known. But, let go, let love, let them move on, do whatever they want to do with their life. And as long as they're not causing me any further damage and, ruined my dancing out in the music scene with that viciousness at the Koala Tavern, Yes, I'm still livid about that. There's no need for that. I was coexisting quite harmoniously, even with the other female that was so entitled and obnoxious. So I figure, well, you can't control who people fall in love with, can you? It's kind of a bit like winning the lottery. It either happens or it doesn't happen. But there was no need for that bad fucking behaviour. So, but as far as spirits intervening in my love life like David Davidson has tried to do from time to time, I don't encourage that either, because I have agency and free will in who I choose to love, or not love as the case may be. And I move on when I'm good and ready, not being set up with all those cruel, vicious little pranks. Right, where were we? Mummy T has spoken. Cleave to my truth, no matter what, no matter who, no matter where. They continued with their efforts, but to no avail. The wine glass never moved from its central position. Oh, by the way, all of that ugliness could have been avoided by simply communicating properly and effectively in actual sentences and paragraphs and, I don't know, 1,000 fucking word essay explaining what their true agendas were and what that was all about. But no, they can't be honest. I think that's what really upsets me the most, the lack of basic fucking courtesy and decency and honesty. But then I have to remember that not many people are like me. I've died in near-death experiences too many fucking times to live in dishonesty and treachery and debasement and lies. I've never been one to tell lies, even as a child, and the reason for that was the initial wounding. When you're raised by pedophiles who live with deception and trickery and grooming and hiding their true agendas and their true intentions, even with the adults in the family, often seduce them so that they'll turn a fucking blind eye, as happened with my family of origin. When you live with that level of ugliness and putrescence and lies and deception, then you don't want to live like that ever again as an adult woman, or if you're a male survivor, as an adult man. And yes, it makes us a bit unusual and unique, because we won't run and we won't fucking hide. You don't wish well for us? Fine, go be awesome somewhere the fuck off. Don't ever darken our doorstep again. But by the same token, don't expect us to live with and for and by and go along with your lies. We just lost Virginia Giuffre. Was it yesterday or the day before that news came to me? I think it was yesterday. Virginia Giuffre, Virginia Roberts, who spoke out against Prince Andrew, which took great courage, by the way. We've lost her to brutal domestic violence and, no doubt, long-term complex PTSD from her being sold out and sex trafficked by Jeffrey Epstein. So the price we pay for standing in our own integrity and our own light as survivors of child sexual abuse is immense and often ends either in suicide or dying at the hands of some fucking monster. So let me tell you, my fucking monsters out there, you come for me I'll take you with me, babies. Had too many men try to kill me already in my 30s. Do you think for one moment, now that I'm old and alone and vulnerable in your eyes, that I'm going to go down without a fight? I've got nothing left to lose. I was stripped of everything in that will dispute by my own mother and her cohorts. Back in 2012. I've been rebuilding my life ever since, just to even barely stay alive. So, go be awesome, go live your best lives, and don't fuck with the Tanya. That's all I ask you. You fucked with me already enough. Don't go there again. Have a bit of bloody basic respect and decency. Using the song lyrics to look right through me as if I was not there. Fucking bloodless coward. Yes, I'm going to publish this video because it's the truth. No prize at all. No prize. Not even worth nurturing a friendship with someone like that. Show me who you truly are, and that's it. Done. Done. Right, here we go. We're back to the story, the seance. They continued with their efforts, but to no avail. The wine glass never moved from its central position. Suddenly Fred broke away from the group and stood up. At this point I looked at my watch and saw that we had passed 2 hours away, said Harry. Takes a lot of time to talk on Ouija board, do Ouija board seances. It's actually, most of the time, a huge waste of time and energy, and you'd be better off to just do automatic writing or sit in meditation and ask your own questions. Just gonna excuse me a moment. I've just left my friend's place not that long ago and she's ringing me. I'll be back, people of Earth. I'll just check what's happening. Right, sorry about that. Where were we? They continued with their efforts, but to no avail. The wine glass never moved from its central position. Suddenly Fred broke away from the group and stood up. At this point I looked at my watch and saw that we had passed 2 hours away, said Harry. Fred glanced at the glass and said that if the presents turned up to say hello from him, and with that he made his way to the bar, muttering that he was going to have a nightcap and then get to bed. As Fred made his way to the bar, the education officer walked into the lounge and Buck immediately called across to him, "Come and join us, Sandy. We need 4 to do this." "No, you don't. That's nonsense." But anyway. With that, Sandy made his way over to them and took over Fred's seat. Buck quickly explained to him what they were trying to do. Meantime, Fred had finished his nightcap and bid them all good night. As they settled down, another period of concentration began, with Buck intoning, "Is anyone there?" But this time, to the amazement of everyone, the wine glass moved slowly across to the yes card. In reply to Buck's questioning, the glass moved, as if by some unseen hand, around the table and spelt out a message that was for Sandy. At this stage of the proceedings, I must admit that both Jock and I were a little uneasy about continuing, said Harry, but we did, and the glass carried on spelling its message, which was that Sandy's father had died. That did it, and Sandy stood up very hot under the collar. "I don't think that's very funny. One doesn't joke about things like that," he said. Having said his piece, Sandy departed in high dudgeon. Jock, Buck and Harry Payne remained seated around the table, discussing what had happened. We were all adamant that nobody had tried to cheat by pushing the glass, said Harry, and he continued, "I must say, though, I had a very uneasy feeling about the whole thing, and after about 10 minutes we all retired to bed. The time was 11:30 p.m. The following morning, Jock, Buck and Harry Payne sat discussing the events of the previous evening over breakfast. They all denied having done anything, and Harry said, "I couldn't see Sandy being the culprit, not from what he had said after it had happened." None of them saw Sandy until later, when he came into the lounge after lunch. In his hand was a piece of paper. It was a cable which he had received 30 minutes earlier. He handed the cable to Buck and told him to read it out to the rest of them. As I heard what he was saying, I could feel a cold shiver of fear and incredulity coming over me, said Harry. The cable said simply, "Regret to inform you that your father passed away 4:30 p.m. Sunday." Harry Payne continues, "You can imagine our feelings when we heard the news. The cable was genuine and had only been received half an hour before. They were all shattered at the news and everyone was speechless." Then Buck remarked, 4:30 p.m. in England would be 11 p.m. our time last night, just before Sandy joined us. There was no way that Sandy could have known this at the time, and his father had not been ill. He had not received the cable until the Monday lunchtime, after which he made his way to the mess. The final word comes from Harry Payne. "None of us could explain it. We didn't know how it happened, but you can rest assured that we never again tried out the wine glass and alphabet trick to pass the time." They say that there are many things happening in this world of ours which cannot be explained logically or rationally, and, as far as I am concerned, this was one of them. And, Harry Payne added, the time difference between the two countries is 6.5 hours, and that was one of the things that made us all have a good think about what had gone on. I have often thought about it since, but still cannot come up with an explanation as to what happened or what force was moving that glass. Chapter 26. The Harrier Jet Mystery. At 16:59 hours on Thursday, 22nd of October 1987, a Harrier GR5, piloted by Lieutenant Commander Taylor Scott, took off from British Aerospace's test aerodrome at Dunsfold in Surrey on what should have been a routine test flight, but became a mystery like the Mary Celeste. Scott had filed a flight plan showing that he would climb to 30,000 feet, then level out over Boscombe Down to make some high-speed runs at that height to check out a few small faults, one being to ensure that the oxygen master warning light was functioning correctly on the onboard oxygen generating system. The duration of the test flight was for approximately 50 minutes. The flight was the final British Aerospace test flight before handing over the Harrier GR5 aircraft to the Royal Air Force for a new squadron at RAF Wittering. For test pilot Taylor Scott, it was the final flight. Just as he was getting airborne, Scott was instructed to change frequencies so that military air traffic controllers at West Drayton and Farnborough could monitor his test flight. At this stage, nothing unusual, and it was a routine request for the military to monitor the test flight. At 17:06 hours, test pilot Scott reported he was climbing rapidly to his flight ceiling over Boscombe Down. That was to be his last report. Meanwhile, military radar units tracked the Harrier jet, and they saw it level out at 30,000 feet over Boscombe Down, the ceiling in the flight plan to start the test runs. But, for some unknown reason, Scott did not confirm that he was on the correct heading. Those plotting the course of the Harrier did not think anything was unawares just because the test pilot had not called them. They had no reason to doubt him. Lieutenant Commander Taylor Scott, aged 40, retired from the Fleet Air Arm to join British Aerospace and was an experienced pilot. But the mystery now began to brew. The aircraft passed over Boscombe Down and flew straight and level at 30,000 feet, but still no radio contact from the test pilot. On the radar screens, the dot moved straight on and on and on. By now, urgent calls were made to try and contact the test pilot in the Harrier aircraft, but to no avail. By 17:30 hours, the Harrier had passed over Yeovilton, and still no radio contact from the pilot. The mystery deepened when, at 1750 hours, the Southern Rescue Coordination Centre at Plymouth was alerted. Meanwhile, the Harrier jet flew steadily on and on and on, but no radio contact from the Harrier pilot, only silence. The ground controllers discussed what could have gone wrong had the radio failed to explain why no radio contact, or had the Harrier gone out of control. That seemed unlikely, for they could see on the radar that it was still flying on and on. Then an American transport aircraft was plotted as it made its way up the Bristol Channel. Here's a photograph of a United States Air Force C-5 Galaxy, like the one which shadowed the pilotless Harrier jet. The mystery deepened when at 1750 hours the Southern Rescue Coordination Centre at Plymouth was alerted. Meanwhile, the Harrier jet flew steadily on and on and on, but no radio contact from the Harrier pilot, only silence. The ground controllers discussed what could have gone wrong. Had the radio failed to explain why no radio contact, or had the Harrier gone out of control? That seemed unlikely, for they could see on the radar that it was still flying on and on. Then an American transport aircraft was plotted as it made its way up the Bristol Channel. It was a United States Air Force C-5 Galaxy bound for Dover, Delaware, from RAF Mildenhall in Suffolk. With no radio contact from the Harrier pilot, urgent action was needed. The pilot of the USAF C-5 Galaxy was radioed to intercept and follow the Harrier jet. The crew immediately changed course, and at 1800 hours, they radioed to say that they had spotted the Harrier flying at 30,000 feet from 90 miles west of Land's End. Just close my curtains. Just a little bit. It's from the side window. But with the sighting of the Harrier, the mystery only deepened still further. Captain Jerry Brunt, the co-pilot of the USAF C-5 Galaxy, said, "We were amazed to find that the canopy frame was closed and that there was no pilot on board. The Galaxy, shadowed the Harrier on a parallel course, but about 80 miles behind. At first sight of the Harrier, the Americans tried to reach it by radio and tried a complete range of frequencies, but without any success. The reason became obvious. Why no reply when they saw it was a ghost aircraft, flying as if guided by an unseen hand, no pilot on board. Throughout it all, the Harrier flew on and on and on. It was weird," said Captain Jerry Brunt. The American crew set up a film to video the Harrier jet and they recorded it for 63 minutes until it ran out of fuel and plunged into the sea. Throughout its flight, the pilotless Harrier flew straight and level at 30,000 feet, and the American crew reported that there was no sign of any damage except for the canopy and pilot missing. How could it happen? Where was the pilot? The mystery deepens still further. A massive air and sea search was launched to try and find the pilot, for it was only natural to assume that he had ejected from the Harrier. But detailed searches failed to find any trace of the pilot. The alarm bells were now ringing, but late in the day. At no time was there any hint of trouble, and the Harrier only crashed when it ran out of fuel. It had maintained its height at 30,000 feet. But where was the pilot? Why no warning? And why over the sea? The pilot had not expected to be over the sea. His flight plan showed, excuse me, he would only fly over land between Boscombe Down and Yeovilton in Somerset. He was therefore only dressed in a normal Royal Air Force flying suit with bone dome helmet. He was not wearing the full immersion suit, which is mandatory when flying over the sea. The investigation got underway, and a long list of possible causes were put forward to explain the mysterious disappearance of the Harrier test pilot. It was a mystery, one of the most baffling in aviation history, and there was more to come. But let us look at the facts so far. The Harrier test pilot was strapped into a Martin Baker Mark 12 ejection seat, being the type fitted to the British Aerospace Harrier GR5. Martin Baker ejector seats are in use with 76 Air Forces, and they have a perfect track record. They have no record of one of their seats ever having been accidentally fired during flight. So why should an experienced test pilot, whose job it was to sort out the faults, pull the black and yellow firing handle between his knees if the seat did not eject accidentally? There is a set procedure to eject, for it is essential not to move, and the right hand would grip the firing handle, while the left hand would grip the wrist of the right hand. So it would not be an accident, and let us remember the Harrier was flying at 30,000 feet. However, let us assume the test pilot ejected. He would have triggered a rapid sequence of events. First, rocket motors would propel the seat from the Harrier. At the same time, the canopy would be blasted away. A split second later, a small drogue parachute would open to steady the seat. Normally the seat is then separated 1.5 seconds later, and a main parachute would then open to bring down the test pilot safely. But an ejection at 30,000 feet would mean the pilot would remain strapped into his seat as he fell from 30,000 feet to 10,000 feet, with only a small drogue parachute and a small barometric device to keep the seat steady. At 10,000 feet, a barometric device would have automatically separated the pilot and deployed the main parachute. So, a pilot is well aware of what an ejection means. But why no distress call? A search was still underway for the pilot and the ejection seat. Experts sifted through a list of possible causes. Then a breakthrough came when, some 24 hours after the accident, the body of British Aerospace's test pilot, Taylor Scott, was found in a field near Winterbourne, Stoke in Wiltshire, on the edge of Salisbury Plain and not far from Boscombe Down. His badly damaged parachute was a mile away, so who had been flying the Harrier? And let us remember, the last radio message from the test pilot came at 17:06 hours as he neared Boscombe Down just before he levelled out at 30,000 feet. With no further radio broadcast, did Scott eject soon after that radio message? If so, why? He had not reached his ceiling, so would not be checking the oxygen system, so that can be ruled out. But why no warning? And if he ejected, where was the ejector seat? But the $64,000 question must be, who levelled the Harrier out at 30,000 feet and switched on the autopilot? If Scott had done so, he would have been way past the Boscombe Down area. There was no ejector seat in the area around where the body was found. The experts now came forward with new theories, and in the knowledge that part of the flight test involved checking the emergency oxygen system, the main theory put forward was that the oxygen failed and this caused the pilot to eject after jettisoning the cockpit canopy, which was found near the body. But why no warning from the pilot? After all, he was a test pilot. And where was his ejection seat? A huge search for his ejection seat failed to find any trace of it. This led to the theories that it may still be aboard the Harrier. If that was the case, it would indicate that the pilot had been sucked out of his aircraft. But how? Then, on Sunday, the 25th of October, the Harrier mystery took a new turn when it was discovered that the ejector seat into which Lieutenant Commander Taylor Scott was strapped was still in the Harrier jet. Experts now said the pilot was accidentally killed when he was sucked out of his aircraft. But how? Was he not strapped in the ejector seat, which is in the aircraft at the bottom of the sea? At no time did the test pilot give any hint of being in trouble. So how did it happen? It is a complete mystery. It was assumed that Taylor Scott had ejected from the Harrier, but that was ruled out when a video film taken by the American crew of the United States Air Force C-5 Galaxy transport aircraft, which shadowed the Harrier, clearly showed that the ejector seat remained in the Harrier. A Ministry of Defence Board of Inquiry studied the 63-minute video of the Harrier's unexplained flight across southern Britain, the Bristol Channel, and out over the sea. After the test pilot left the Harrier over the Boscombe Down area shortly after 17:06 hours, the Harrier jet flew on under the control of its autopilot for 800 miles, another 90 minutes before running out of fuel and plunging into the sea at 1900 hours. Why? How did it do it? Why did an experienced test pilot abandon his airworthy Harrier GR5 without any warning? So far no one has come up with the answer. With very little evidence to go on, it has been suggested that the Harrier's cockpit canopy came off at about 30,000 feet, either because an object had struck it or because the bolts failed. With every turn, the Harrier jet mystery deepens. The good news is that the video film of the Harrier was able to give an accurate position of where it went into the sea. The bad news is that the Harrier plunged into the sea 800 miles west of Land's End and now lies in the southwestern approaches and is off the continental shelf in water 12,000 feet deep. Recovery would be very difficult and costly. Experts investigating the Harrier jet mystery told British Aerospace and the Ministry of Defence that if the accident is to be solved, the aircraft will have to be raised from the seabed. That is an obvious statement to make, but is easier said than done. Naval experts said the exercise to raise the Harrier would be extremely expensive and may even then not prove conclusive. A civilian ship, the Cable Protector, was contacted by the Ministry of Defence Board of Inquiry to search the seabed at the crash site for the Harrier jet. They used underwater mini submarines equipped with cameras, but it was a fruitless search, even though they knew the area in which to search. Also, the Harrier carried a 30-day locator transmitter, but the signal strength may be weak due to the very cold water. The ship gave up and returned to port. So, will the Harrier jet mystery ever be solved? The 11 American crew members who shadowed the pilotless Harrier in their C-5 Galaxy said they watched it with amazement, flying straight and level. Why should an experienced test pilot fail to keep in radio contact? Was it more than an accident? Pathologists examined the body of Lieutenant Commander Taylor Scott in the hope of discovering how he died, but no news other than what was expected for someone falling a great height with a badly damaged parachute. But why was it badly damaged? The Ministry of Defence Board of Inquiry concentrated on the ejector seat equipment, so it is clear that the Harrier was airworthy, for it flew perfectly straight and level on its pilotless 800-mile journey before spiralling down into the sea. But Martin Baker, the makers of the Mark 12 ejector seat fitted to the Harrier GR5, said there was no evidence to support any claims that the seat caused the death of the pilot. The Martin Baker Mark 12 ejection seat's headbox, which houses the main parachute and drogue parachutes, has a positive lock. This opens when the parachute drogue rocket is fired. But all this is just speculation. The answers can only be found by examination of the wreckage and the accident data recorder. But the Harrier jet is not likely to give up the answers. It lies at the bottom of the sea. The Harrier jet mystery remains a mystery. It looks as though the drogue gun fired in situ. This normally fires after the seat ejects, thus deploying the main parachute and releasing the pilot from the seat. So, did the impossible happen? If so, Who put the Harrier on its 30,000 ceiling, and who set the autopilot? A mystery. An inquest into the accident on Monday 28th of March 1988 failed to solve the mystery. The Ministry of Defence accident report said the accident could have been caused by a small torch which was used for map reading and, when not in use, was clipped to the side of the cockpit. According to the theory, the small torch fell and became lodged under the pilot's seat beneath a metal bar and an emergency manual override handle which, when activated, fired an explosive cartridge to jettison the pilot free from his seat if the two do not automatically separate upon ejection from the aircraft. The Ministry of Defence accident report then surmised that when the pilot levelled off at 30,000 feet, he would have been almost facing the glare of the low sun. But let us not forget, Scott was an experienced test pilot, and it was the end of October. At 1700 hours, the sun would be very weak, also. Scott would have been prepared for that. Synchronicities, people of Earth. It's a bit fucking chilling, the synchronicities. However, to continue with the Ministry of Defence accident report theory, having levelled out, they surmised Scott was blinded by the glare of the sun, and this hindered his ability to see his instrument panel. It is wholly conceivable that he then lowered his seat to obtain a better view of the cockpit instruments, said the report. As the seat moved downwards, the connector rod from the emergency handle bent over the light and, in the process, pulled out a safety device separating the firing pin and the percussion cap of the cartridge. The pin thus dropped out, the cartridge exploded and fired a parachute which pulled the pilot out of his seat and through the canopy. So the theory goes. But not possible. Scott was strapped tightly into his ejector seat. The seat is still in the aircraft at the bottom of the sea. So what did happen? Pardon me. That I cannot answer. It is safe to say. It was safe to say it was not the sun or the torch, as they claim. The small torch, which was standard equipment at the time of the fatal flight of Harrier ZD-325, has now been banned, pending modification of its mounting. The other theories put forward for the accident were weaker than the wandering torch theory. The first theory suggested that the pilot became disoriented, because his oxygen mask disconnected and he pulled the emergency mechanism after the seat failed to fire. Remember, Scott was a test pilot. The second theory, remember the pilot was an experienced test pilot with an above average knowledge of the oxygen system, pulled the ejection handle in mistake for an emergency oxygen handle, although normally it is impossible to fire the manual override inside the aircraft. Scott was an experienced test pilot, yet all of this was carried out without any Mayday signal. I ask you, not possible. Scott gave no hint of any trouble. His voice was normal when he checked in with London military radar at 17:06, and the Harrier proved it was airworthy, only crashing after it ran out of fuel. So the mystery remains. The Harrier GR5 in brackets ZD325 was the sixth production aircraft and was on its last test flight before handing over to the Royal Air Force. The investigators have stressed that the root cause of the accident remains undetermined. The experts have not solved the mystery, they have only clouded the issue and, if anything, thrown doubt on the test pilot's ability. Mr. John Elgar, the coroner at the inquest on Monday, 28th of March 1988, described Scott as a brave, dedicated and skilled test pilot. He recorded an open verdict after hearing how Lieutenant Commander Taylor Scott was killed because his parachute was so badly torn that it could not support him. But that does not explain why or how an experienced test pilot abandoned his airworthy Harrier. Had the test pilot other problems on his mind? Or was it sabotage, a mystery that will never be solved? This photo is for the story that we're about to begin, chapter 27. Lightning XS-894 taking part in the Fighting Fifth flypast over RAF Binbrook just weeks before its ill-fated mission with Captain William Schaffner, whose body has never been found. Which is interesting because it forms kind of the numeral 5. Well, it's transposed in the laptop, but it's facing to the right in the book. Chapter 27, Lightning XS-894 Mystery. After the Harrier mystery, we now have the Lightning mystery, but this one, a mystery with a capital M. At 2200 hours on Tuesday, the 8th of September 1970, Lightning XS-894 lifted off the runway and climbed quickly into the night sky over Royal Air Force Binbrook in Lincolnshire. At the controls of the single-seater jet fighter was an American pilot, Captain William Schaffner, who was on his second tour at RAF Binbrook, and he loved to fly the Lightning. He was very much at home with it. Here's another photo. I'll just read the blurb. Lightning XS-894 of number 5 Squadron, so that's why they formed the number 5. Seen here in May 1967, just after it swerved off the runway at RAF Binbrook. The pilot, Flight Lieutenant Al Davey, was unhurt, but he was killed after crashing in Lightning XS-924. in April 1968. Right, back to the story. For Captain Schaffner, it was just another routine night exercise. He had done them many times before, but this time it was to be his last and to be anything but routine. At 2300 hours, just 1 hour after getting airborne, he radioed in to say that he was in trouble, but still flyable. The ground control kept him in radio contact as they ordered him out over the sea to the ditching area, where he was told to meet up with a Shackleton before ditching into the sea. The doomed Lightning arrived over the ditching area, a point a few miles at sea, just off Flamborough Head, and the Shackleton was already there. So far all was going according to plan, but things were soon to change. As soon as Captain Schaffner was over the ditching area, he was told to eject, the normal procedure, and the pilot is then picked up from the sea. But for some unknown reason, he could not eject. The ejection seat did not fire. Time and time again he tried, but without success. Valuable seconds were now ticking away. The Shackleton circled the area, waiting and waiting. The crew could not understand why he had not ejected. What could have gone wrong? Was he ill? Suddenly the Lightning jet fighter dipped its nose and started a steady descent down to the sea. With the pilot still on board, it looked as though he'd given up trying to eject, and he was trying to belly land onto the sea. Slowly the Lightning dropped towards the cold, uninviting sea. Down, down. Minutes later the Lightning hit the water and settled on it like a great metal bird and floated in a relatively calm sea. As soon as the Lightning hit the deck, the Shackleton appeared overhead and illuminated the area. They wanted to give the pilot all the help possible, and it was a very good moral support to know that they were there. They lit up the area. The crew of the Shackleton were very relieved to see the pilot climb out onto the wing and get into the sea. But did they see the pilot get out? They could not hover like a helicopter and keep over the area in order to illuminate the downed aircraft all the time. They had to go round and round. So are they sure that they saw the pilot get out? We do not know. They thought they did, and at the time they said they saw him climb out onto the wing. I feel distressed just reading this actually. For quite some time the Lightning floated on the sea. Then, slowly, it sank beneath the waves and settled on the seabed in an upright position. Back at RAF Binbrook, Captain Schaffner's wife was told that her husband had had to ditch in the sea just off Flamborough Head in East Yorkshire, but not to worry, for the Shackleton was with him when he ditched, and the crew had seen him get out onto the wing before the aircraft went down. I just feel like crying for some reason. Taking this very personally, people of Earth. He was equipped for a sea ditching, and there was no worry. Air sea rescue was underway. So far, so good. But Air sea rescue could not find Captain Schaffner, even though they searched a wide area of sea around where the lightning went down. From the shore, flares had been seen about 10 miles offshore at the time the lightning ditched, but after an all-night search, nothing was found. So where was US Air Force Captain William Schaffner? Just a routine search and rescue, his wife had been told. So what had gone wrong? As the search was coming to a close, a Grimsby trawler, the Ross Kestrel, sighted more red flares and went to investigate. But she found nothing, and the trawler crew said the sea was getting rough. At first light on Wednesday, the 9th of September, the Shackletons were out again. This time the search was intensified, and they were joined by an air-sea rescue helicopter from nearby RAF Leconfield. Also joining in the search were 3 lifeboats from Bridlington, Filey and Flamborough, and they combed a 12-square-mile area in rough sea, but the search was fruitless. So where was Captain Schaffner? As the search parties returned empty-handed, an official from the Ministry of Defence said, "I don't think we are going to find him," and the headlines of the local newspaper, the Grimsby Evening Telegraph, for 9th of September were, "Hopes fade for Lynx jet pilot." So where was Captain Schaffner? And why the sudden change? When he ditched into the sea, they said it was a straightforward air-sea rescue. The mystery deepens, and words started to get changed from what was first said. The Defence Ministry official then added, "I don't think he got out of the plane. No wreckage has been found." What a stupid statement, and what was the purpose of it? The Shackleton crew were with Captain Schaffner, and at the time they said they saw him climb out onto the wing and get into the sea, well before the lightning went down in one piece. It did not break up. So who is right? Since announcing Captain Schaffner's ditching into the sea, his wife waited anxiously at RAF Binbrook for news, being told at first that he had been seen getting out of the aircraft, then that he hadn't. All so very strange. Captain Schaffner was a very experienced pilot, having flown the F-104 and had over 6,000 hours on fast jets. He was on his second tour at RAF Binbrook, and he was on strength with number 5 Squadron, a very, very experienced pilot and well aware of what a ditching at sea entailed. But now the mystery deepens still further. So let us look at the facts to date. Captain Schaffner radioed to say that he was in trouble, but no SOS was heard before he ditched, and no signal was received from his Sabre, a search and rescue beacon carried by all Royal Air Force pilots. Why? During the time of the search, RAF Leconfield said the weather was grey and windy. Coxswain John King of the Bridlington lifeboat said, "If the pilot had got into his dinghy, I fear we would have found him by now. The weather is beginning to deteriorate. We were shipping heavy seas, and on one occasion our bowman was lifted off his feet and crashed onto the deck, injuring his back. So what had happened? Why the change of story after the Shackleton crew said they saw him get out and into the sea? And why did the Ministry of Defence say no wreckage had been found? They knew that the Lightning got down in one piece. It even floated for quite some time. The Shackleton crew illuminated the area, and the lifeboat coxswain had said they would have found him if he had got into his dinghy. The Shackleton crew said he had got into the sea. So where was Captain Schaffner? Who is telling the truth? An investigation got underway, and it was decided to recover the Lightning from its watery grave. The divers who went down to inspect the Lightning found it sitting on the seabed, complete, with the canopy still on, but no pilot. How had he got out with the canopy still in place? It was very eerie and a complete mystery. The Lightning jet fighter XS-894 was lifted from off the seabed and taken back to RAF Binbrook. Now the mystery deepens still further and becomes a chilling, eerie mystery. On examination back at RAF Binbrook, they found the Lightning had only slight nose damage, otherwise it was perfect. But the cockpit was closed and no pilot inside. No one could answer that. The seat was still intact. The seat had fired but not worked, what they call a light strike. It did the strike but did not blow the canopy, and the seat was still in place. So very strange. So where was Captain Schaffner? Weeks later, the body still had not been found, and the RAF inquiry did not solve the mystery. The Lightning had been found sitting upright on the seabed, canopy on, but no pilot inside. So how had the pilot got out? And where did he go? To this day, the body of Captain Schaffner has never been found. To add to the mystery, a year later, another Lightning from RAF Binbrook and also piloted by a USAF pilot ditched in the same spot as Captain Schaffner had done, and he was picked up safely by helicopter. So what had happened to Captain Schaffner? He had ditched as ordered and in the right place. In 1987, 17 years after the incident, I set about trying to solve the eerie mystery. Being ex-provost, that was my job when in the Royal Air Force. But even I could not chip the veil of secrecy that surrounded the Lightning mystery. At the Ministry of Defence, doors were closed in my face, and at the all-telling United States Air Force Records Office, I only had to mention Captain Schaffner and Lightning XS-894 to have the door slammed in my face. The skeleton remains in the cupboard, and Captain Schaffner's body remains. Where? That I cannot answer. One thing is certain, it was not in the Lightning, but the ejection seat was, and the canopy was on. Chapter 28. The Hauntings at Handley Page. Mr. A.J. Charlton from Langworth near Lincoln worked as an aircraft fitter with Handley Page Limited for 25 years. He was with the firm until they went into liquidation in March 1970. After the collapse of Handley Page, he joined the security firm and was one of the security guards engaged to patrol the hangars and buildings which had been part of the Handley Page factory and offices. It was at the Handley Page factory that Mr. Charlton met his first ghost. The Handley Page works were at Radlett Aerodrome, just south of St Albans in Hertfordshire. In the early days, Radlett was nothing more than a grass field. During the war years, the Handley Page factory produced bombers. First the twin-engined Hampden, then the mighty four-engined Halifax bomber. At peak production, Halifaxes were leaving the production line at Radlett at the rate of 40 aircraft per month during 1944. It's quite a lot, isn't it? 10 per week. After the war ended, Handley Page at Radlett produced Hastings and Hermes aircraft. The Hermes story started badly when, on 2nd of December 1945, the prototype G-AGSS took off from Radlett on its maiden flight. The aircraft ran into trouble, and after a succession of dives and stalls, it hit the ground in an inverted dive, killing the pilots Talbot and Wright. The wreckage was almost totally destroyed by fire. Radlett then entered the jet age in the early 1950s with production of the Victor bomber, and for Mr. Charlton and many of the workforce, the Ghost Age. At 10:35 a.m. on the morning of 20th of August 1959, the top-secret prototype Victor Mark II bomber XH668 lifted off from the runway at Boscombe Down in Wiltshire on a routine test flight. But, like the top-secret Harrier in a previous story, it was destined never to return. It first flew on 20th of February 1959, and it had been retained by Handley Page for trials. The Victor bomber flight path was across the Pembrokeshire coast and out over the Irish Sea. At 11:37 a.m, its position was 265 degrees 16 miles from Strumblehead, and its speed was Mach 0.9. The Victor bomber was being plotted by a shore radar station when suddenly the echo on the radar display disappeared. 1 second it was there, the next it had gone. At the time the Victor disappeared from the radar screen, its height was unknown, but it should have been around 52,000 feet. With the Victor overdue, the search and rescue teams were put on standby, and as time passed, Royal Air Force Coastal Command, Shackletons and naval ships began a search over the sea, but all to no avail. As each drew a blank, the fears for the Victor crew, squadron leaders R.J. Morgan and G.B. Stockman, and flight lieutenants L.N. Williams and R.J. Hannaford and Mr. R.H. Williams, the chief test observer of Handley Page, grew. Operation Victor Search got underway, and it was controlled by HMS Harrier. It involved more than 40 ships and 4,000 men and women, and it took over a year. A Victor bomber like the one that crashed. The top secret Victor bomber XH668 crashed into the Irish Sea just 6 months to the day since it first flew, and it had logged about 100 flying hours. All the 5 crew were killed. But from their watery grave, the ghost of one of the crew returned to haunt the Handley Page factory. Why had the ghost returned? Did he know the reason for the crash? Was it to warn others, or make the mere mortals pay for their mistake? The Victor bomber hit the sea at a speed of over 800 miles per hour, and it broke up into 1,000 pieces. The crew had no time to act. In fact, they were listening to Mrs. Dales's diary. It was later established that the loss of a pitot head, a 2-foot metal tube, had been the cause of the crash. But was that the real cause? Was the ghost saying otherwise? What was the reason for haunting the Handley Page factory? A few weeks after the Victor bomber crash, many workers on the night duty shift claimed to have seen the ghost of one of the Victor crew. One man swore he had seen the ghost of Mr. Williams. Rumours became very rife over the weeks, and they reached the ears of Mr. Charlton, who worked permanent night shift. He thought no more about it, until one night, as he explains, I personally saw one of the crew walking across the hangar, apparently heading for his car, which was parked outside. Being as only a handful of fitters were working that night, I assumed he must be an intruder and moved across to intercept him. But when I got close, he just disappeared without glancing in my direction. It was only then did Mr. Charlton realise that it was a ghost that he had tried to intercept. He now knew that the rumours about the ghosts were true. He had just witnessed it. The apparition I saw was as he would appear, ready for flight, said Mr. Charlton. He was wearing sort of boiler suit type overalls, and when I saw him he looked so real, and I walked towards him because he would have been an intruder at that time, which was 1 a.m. And it was not to be his last confrontation with the ghost. On another occasion, when I and another man were the only 2 working in the hangar, the ghost was seen again, said Charlton. My assistant had gone across the hangar to the toilet, and he came back rather agitated. He kept mumbling that he had seen someone walking about, and it was very eerie. I tried to assure him that it could not be so, as we were the only 2 in the factory, but he would not listen. In the end I went to see if there was anybody, but there was nobody there. I saw nothing. Then on another occasion, when a number of fitters were working, I and my assistant proceeded to the Victor bomber we were to work on for the night. When we got to the Victor, we stood under the wings and were about to get our tools ready when, suddenly, a heavy trolley which had been left under the wing started bucking and jumping about, although there was no one else about and no cause for it. Was this a warning? Had the ghost returned to warn others? Whatever the reason, Mr. Charlton was certain of one thing. I think Radlett Aerodrome and all the buildings must be one of the most haunted in the country, he said. It is easy to see why Mr. Charlton comes to that conclusion when we look at the catalogue of ghostly happenings. Mr. Charlton is not a man to be easily frightened by the sight of ghosts, but many of the workers were. One night the night stoker ran to the night security man, scared and breathless, panting that he had been visited by a ghost in his boiler house. He was too scared to go back, and nothing could induce him to do so. So, what had he seen to instill such fear into him? I cannot answer that. All clock patrols at Handley Page were done by the Works Fire Brigade, and many of them saw many ghosts. Some were too scared with the ghostly encounters and resigned the job. They had good reason to do so. There had recently been a suicide at the Handley Page factory, and everything comes in threes. The man killed was a spray painter who had been working on a Victor bomber. It was said at the time that he slipped off, but many knew he saw the ghost. Was this what caused him to fall? Some blamed the ghost. On another occasion, the ghostly encounter happened while Mr. Charlton and his assistant were working on a Hastings aircraft that had come in for repair. My assistant liked to shut his eyes during the dinner breaks, said Charlton. His favourite spot was the wardroom near the front of the aircraft. On this particular occasion, he was woken up by severe slamming of the door, although no one else was aboard the craft. Another fitter who was working on this aircraft said to me one night that there was someone else on board, although this was not so. On 21st of April 1962, Sir Frederick Handley Page died, and with him died his aircraft factory. Handley Page, one-time builder of the first successful four-engined bomber in the Second World War, had to drop out of large aircraft manufacture and instead continue in the civil aviation field. But the end of the road was near for Radlett, and in March 1970, Handley Page was finally wound up and the haunted airfield closed. But not before the haunted airfield had claimed its third victim. The second death was a young man who was helping to remove some ducts from above the false ceiling. He stepped back onto a hardboard panel and fell to his death. Mr. Charlton was there at the time, and he helped the ambulance man to put him on a stretcher. Again they said it was the ghost that frightened him and caused him to step backwards. The third man to die was a Saturday night burglar. He had been removing copper piping in the same area where the others had died, and he too fell to his death. Did he see the ghost? After Handley Page closed down, Mr. Charlton joined the security firm which took over security for the old Radlett aerodrome, and he was on night duty patrols. The security firm's headquarters were at the main gate, a mile along the runway, and, because of the distance involved, they used a van in which to go and check all the buildings. Between patrols, the men sat in the rest room. This was haunted, said Charlton. At about 1 o'clock in the morning, not every morning, we would hear the back door open and footsteps walk past our restroom door and go out at the front. Just a moment. Why are you here, Davidson? Go back to the light, please. No, I'm not engaging with you. I'm reading a story to the people of Earth, and no one invited you to this party of consciousness. He's laughing. I don't know why he finds that funny, but anyway. I used to dash to open the door, but never ever saw anything. Same thing happened when he appeared at my door early June 2016. Totally freaked me and my dog out, by the way. Especially my dog. That's how I realised it was an actual spirit at my front door. Worried that I'd gone crazy because I'd just finished weaning off all my psych meds and I thought I was having some kind of funny turn. No, it was him. Dear Goddess. One section of the old Handley Page factory was taken over by Granada Publishing. This was the hangar in which Charlton had worked as a fitter. Don't speak to me, Davidson, you're interrupting. Now he was a security guard and checked over his old hangar 3 times a night. Whilst I never saw anything on my night patrols, the building being empty, I often heard voices which confirmed that one of the Handley Page patrolmen had mentioned, confirmed what one of the Handley Page patrolmen had mentioned some time previously, said Charlton. Another of the buildings that Mr. Charlton and his colleagues patrolled had been taken over by Flarepath printers, and they had to make sure that all lights were out when they left. Lila Tov. That means good night. Just said good night in Hebrew. Mr. Charlton was on duty one night in 1972 when he saw all the office lights on in the building. It was about 7:30 in the evening and he thought they must be working late. But, unknown to Charlton, it was the guests who were working, and he walked into another ghostly encounter. With all the office lights on, I thought they must be working late, he said. So I went into the Flarepath printer's office to inquire what time they would be going. But when I entered the building, there was nobody there except an elderly gent sitting at a desk. So I went towards him, but on getting close, he just vanished. Mr. Charlton was well aware of the ghosts, and he took it all in his stride. He did not, however, like the doom-laden atmosphere, as he explains. Another eerie building to enter was the one occupied by President Office Furniture. 3 men had lost their lives in this area at different times, and I think their ghosts still roam about there. After unlocking the doors at night and entering, all may be quiet for a while, then a loud bang. But after switching on all the lights, nothing could be seen, only the evil atmosphere. And he added, this was the area where previously the Handley Page fireman had seen ghosts and resigned rather than carry on working in such a haunted place. Mr. Charlton has now retired after working 25 years at Handley Page Aircraft Factory at Radlett Aerodrome. And then, don't do that, Davidson. Don't touch me or oppress me. And then as a security guard at the old aerodrome, 16 years were on permanent night shift duties. And over those years, he had many ghostly encounters. Right, people of Earth, we've got 3 more chapters to go, but they're very short pages, so I think we'll reach completion of this book this evening. Won't that be wonderful? It's been lovely, it's been real, it's been lovely. Why did she think that he's a boy? Sorry, I just got distracted here. Yes, we'll reach completion, I think. I think we'll manage it because we've got 50 minutes, so just I think about just under an hour. Well, let's go, let's crack on. Chapter 29. The Old Parsonage Hotel. I'm feeling very lightheaded all of a sudden. But that will be, day 5 of Viagra for my bladder. How fucking glamorous is that, people of Earth? It's no wonder the men have all head for the hills. I mean, how unsexy is a woman who needs to take the Viagra? But, whatever. People come, people go, real love stay, like an octopus on your face. Just not controlling and smothering though, because I hate that shit. Anyway, where was I? The Old Parsonage Hotel. Just walked into the bar at the Old Parsonage, and there it was. Shut up, Davidson. You said good night. That means good night. Off you go into the light. And there it was, a figure of a woman, said Jeff Smithson. She was sort of greyish white, like a hazy look, sort of floated towards me, then turned and disappeared before my eyes. It was a ghost, all right. The Old Parsonage Hotel and Restaurant at Crewkerne in Somerset is reputed to be haunted. Had Jeff Smithson seen a ghost? The Old Parsonage has had many sightings of a ghostly figure of a woman, which has become known as the White Lady, and it certainly has the history to attract a ghost. As the name suggests, the building was originally the parsonage to Crewkerne's famous 15th century church. Indeed, a secret tunnel to the church is rumoured to exist, But then the tunnel from the church to the mansion, stories related to about almost every village in England. But in this story, there is a germ of truth in the secret passage. The building is partly 15th and partly 18th century and is of great historical and architectural interest. It is also of great interest regarding the mysterious White Lady ghost and the secret passage. Bill and Betty Bennett called in the summer of 1982. Bill had gone to wash his hands. Suddenly I felt cold, and I glanced into the corner of the room, said Betty. I could not believe my eyes. A whitish hazy light sort of appeared through the wall, and as it moved into the room, I could see it was a woman. It was clearly, you are loved. Yes, thank you very much. It's very sweet. Now go into the light, Davidson. Sorry about that interruption. I only repeated it because he yelled it in my head. It was clearly a shape of a woman, and whilst I stared at her, she vanished right before my eyes. Here's a picture, side view of the old Parsonage Hotel. It was through the side wall on the ground floor that the ghostly White Lady was seen to come through. Betty felt rooted to the spot. She had not even heard her husband return. He sat and listened to what she had to say, then suggested a gin and tonic as a chaser to the other spirit. It's not funny, it was there, said Betty, and she added, Bill took it all too lightly and told me to forget it. In 1984, Mrs. Winifred Grant got in touch with me after reading Ghosts That Haunt Our Old Airfields in the Sunday Mercury. Everything will be fixed. I don't know what you're talking about, David. Please go into the light and interrupting. She wrote to say that she was interested in finding out more about the ghost that is said to haunt the old Parsonage Hotel. After she and her husband had stayed a week, he's muttering more and I'm ignoring it, as you can see by my twitching. I'm not schizophrenic, but it feels like that lately, by the gods. I hope I'm not getting dementia. I swear to God, if I get dementia, I will suicide. It is guaranteed, people of Earth. Anyway, where were we? She wrote to say that he was interested. Nothing of that kind will happen to you, Tanya. Whatever, Davidson, you're not in control of my life and death. I am. She wrote to say that she was interested in finding out more about the ghost that is said to haunt the old Parsonage Hotel. After he yelled out, I simply won't allow it. Isn't that sweet? Ah, that's kind of sweet, considering you tried to kill me, you motherfucker. Honestly, the hypocrisy is not lost on me. She wrote to say that she was interested in finding out more about the ghost that is said to haunt the old Parsonage Hotel after she and her husband had stayed a weekend there in August 1984. The old parsonage was then run by John and Therese Bolt, who had been there under 12 months. So, is the old parsonage haunted? It has certainly changed hands many times. Does the White Lady hold the answer to the reason why? On the Sunday evening, Winifred's husband went for a walk around the village. I got into conversation with two of the locals, who informed him that the old parsonage was haunted and asked if he had seen the ghost. Mr. Grant told his wife, and the next morning she asked the landlord about the ghost. He said there had been 2 sightings of it during the last 12 months, but he did not say he had seen it, said Mrs. Grant. He said one sighting was, he believed, genuine. It was seen in the hotel bar, a white shape, possibly a lady, by a man, a complete stranger, who had only been in the hotel 5 minutes and had never been in the area before. As previously stated, the old parsonage was once the dwelling place of a parson. He was in charge of the tithe barn, which is across the road and has today been converted into 2 houses and 2 flats, which gives some indication of its original size. During the war, Americans were billeted in the house, so there is some wartime connection. It is said that the original stone roof was sold to America. That could be true, for, after the war, the tithe barn had a galvanised tin roof. It's a bit odd, isn't it? Selling off your stone roof. The 2 little cottages that nestle at the side of the old parsonage were built around 1801 and presumably once belonged to the parsonage when it was a farm. The cottages were sold back to the parsonage when it was converted to a hotel sometime after 1959. That's all very well, Davidson, but you have to honour other people's choices and free will. You should hear what he's rabbiting at me. It's nonsense anyway. Mr. Davies was born in one of the little cottages near the old parsonage. My mother and myself were born in these cottages, and we grew up there, he said. My grandmother, who owned the 2 cottages, was born in 1887, just around the corner in Tower Hill Road, and he added, I have never heard my grandmother, mother or anyone ever mention a ghost in the parsonage, and believe for one reason or another that it's a modern invention. Well, there you go. The back view of the old parsonage hotel, this section believed to be 15th century. And this one at Crew Kern, seen here without the ghostly white lady, February 1988. This grandeur front is 18th century. Note, nestling against the old parsonage is Mr. Davies' grandmother's cottage. If you look at the roof on the little cottage, you will see that the bottom part has its original Somerset stone-tiled roof. Interesting. But does that not mean to say that the old parsonage is not haunted? Different people have reported seeing a ghost of a lady. That could be the reason for change of ownership. And that could be the reason. But what about the secret passage? That could be true. But Mr. Davies has his doubts about that too, as he explains. He was very disappointed you didn't have sex with him. Well, he was allegedly married. So, shut up. It's none of your business anyway. By the gods. How ridiculous. So I almost have to laugh. Oh, anyway, where were we? made a vow to myself, and I have stuck to it. Believe me, it's very frustrating for me too, that I would not have sex with a man ever again unless I was absolutely 120% positive that he was in love with me and that his love was genuine. And thank God I didn't. Look how I've been treated. It's abhorrent. So, Davidson with his fantasies can go back to the light, and we can carry on with the story. Am I right? By the gods. They just like to stir me up and mess with my not so fragile mind, by the way. Having to navigate all the bullshit I get from him in the spirit world, and all the bullshit I've been given by living men. It's enough to drive a woman into a frenzy. But I might be frustrated, but I'm not stupid, people of Earth. Kept to my morals and saving my passion and my wonderful sexuality for a man that's genuine. And I'm right to do so, because I've had a lifetime of shitfuckery and horror. Didn't want to have that happen ever again. Right, where are we? I've lost my spot thanks to you. Sorry, he says. But Mr. Davies has his doubts about that too, as he explains. There has always been talk about a mysterious passage that was supposed to run from the cellars to the church, and I have always been interested in the stories. The cottages were only 2 up, 2 down affairs, but in our living room floor there was either a crack in the floor or a loose stone. This gave rise that there could be a secret passage, but I never ever saw the floor because, after the fashion of those days, it was covered with linoleum. Anyway, if one trod on this crack or loose stone, it moved. I often said, "Oh, Granny, is that the secret passage?" And visitors would often remark so. My grandmother was always adamant that no passage, secret or otherwise, ran from the house. She always maintained that, as a child, she had seen the entrance to a passage in one of the barns opposite. This was supposed to have been uncovered by workmen, and when they had finished, it was covered in again. So we now ask, is there a ghost, or is there a secret passage? And if so, are they linked to the church? It is a mystery, and one who would like it solved is Louise M. Brazier, who wrote to me in November 1987. We are the proprietors of the old parsonage, having acquired it some 6 months ago. We have, of course, heard many stories of the sightings of the White Lady, as she is known, but no one seems to know the origin of her existence. We have heard that Mr. Davies thought a secret passage most unlikely, but on the other hand, he did say he never saw the floor, and there was a crack or loose stone. That could have been the secret passage. If not, what was it? Not a cellar and only a 2 up, 2 down cottage, that is for sure. And you do not get smoke without fire. And Mr. Davies said, my grandmother was always adamant that no passage, secret or otherwise, ran from the house. But that would be a natural reaction, for it could be very dangerous to have children looking for a secret passage. So with children around, it would be only wise to deny any secret passage ever existed, to stop them looking for it. Would it have been possible for a secret passage? Yes, but difficult. Barnes Street descends quite steeply, and at the time the secret passage would have been built, The land at the bottom could well have been marshy. Therefore a tunnel would have had to be dug to a great depth. Not impossible, though. But it would have needed much more labour, and would then hardly have been a secret. Still, that is not impossible. Secret tunnels do exist, and I think it quite possible that there is a secret passage. But Mr. Davies said, "Why are you jumping around for joy like a teenage boy? What's going on here?" It's a bit odd. Celebrating your marriage. I don't think so. For that you'd have to have an actual relationship based on true love and some kind of, passion and romance and connection that's authentic. Am I right, people of Earth? Oh, he's a clown. Light Sarnet. Yes, don't like having that thrown back in your face, do you? You know the mama tea is not the marrying kind. I did it once, I didn't like it. I have no intention of ever doing that again. That's why I laughed so uproariously. I'm dancing at your wedding. You can dance on my grave for all I care, quite literally. Tried to put me in my grave when I was 33, so fuck you, Davidson. Here we have, but Mr. Davies, similar to Davidson, is it not? But Mr. Davies said, who is this Mr. Davies? Where did he come into it? Well, anyway, he brings in people and he doesn't explain who the hell they are. It's a bit odd, people of Earth. Anyway, but Mr. Davies said, stop dancing. He's doing like a little Irish jig, which is hilarious. But Mr. Davies said, if such an entrance ever existed, then I think my grandmother probably saw the entrance to some sort of cellar. That I doubt. It was not a cellar. Big wedding. Right, I don't go to other people's weddings, usually. I try to avoid them also. And I certainly won't be getting married. That I doubt. It was not a cellar. I am certain that the secret passage is there. As for the White Lady, I will leave it to the regulars of the old parsonage. After a few pink ladies, might be possible to see the White Lady. Right, we've got to be quick. We've got 27 minutes. Don't interrupt me. I'm on a time frame here. Chapter 30, Murder Cabin. This incident happened in the early 1950s on the main railway line between Stubbins Junction and Helmshaw, just north of Bury in Lancashire. I think my cousin Melvin was born in Bury, I think. In November 1959, William Bill Whitehead joined the railway company at Bury and was taken to join the work gang at the Helmshaw end of the railway line. It was not long before they were ready to move down towards what was to become known as the Murder Cabin. For Bill Whitehead, it was to be where he had his first encounter with a ghost, and he remembers it well. The first encounter I had with the ghost was one morning. I was walking the length of track, and on my return journey, I decided to sit in the cabin to shelter from the rain. I had been in the cabin about 10 minutes when suddenly the apparition came in. Bill Whitehead sat speechless and was unable to move. He continued, it was shaped like a person, all white, but I could see through it. It was all so very weird. And no, you cannot do that, Davidson. I've seen it I've seen it before. I'm over it now. And she says, blushing. And as it passed by me, I felt an icy draught. He's threatening me with his little joke about full body manifestation. It's just a joke, I'm quite certain. But on the other hand, let me just continue reading and preoccupy my mind a bit more. You understand. After the rain had ceased, I left the cabin and continued on my way to rejoin the rest of the gang. I didn't say anything to the men for fear of them thinking I was crackers. Bill Whitehead was indeed a very sane, down-to-earth man. He had not been told that the wayside cabin was haunted, and that cold, wet November morning ghosts were far from his mind. He was more interested in trying to keep dry and warm. But haunted it was. In the early 1950s, two plate layers working with a gang on permanent way repairs, that's what it says, and maintenance on the main line between Helmshore and Stubbins Junction, had an argument one day which gradually escalated into a serious matter. What was a joke soon got out of hand, and hate built up very quickly between them. As the quarrel escalated, the two men carried on working in the same gang, but rarely speaking a civil word to each other. I think we're going to run out of time to finish this book. What a shame. As the quarrel escalated, the two men carried on working in the same gang, I read that. Then one morning, whilst the rest of the gang were working further up the line, one of the men absents himself and, finding an axe in one of the cabins, hid himself behind the door, standing on one of the streets in the corner. His enemy, who was walking the length of track, shortly passed the cabin, and noticing that the door was partly open, when he knew that it should have been shut and locked, decided to look in to see if vandals had been in and done any damage. He crossed over the cabin, stood for a few seconds, then pushed the door wide open and went inside. I'm sorry what I did to you, Tanya. I acknowledge that you're sorry, Davidson. As he entered the cabin, the axe came down on his head, killing him instantly, and he fell with blood pouring from his head. A few days after Bill Whitehead had seen the ghost, he was again in the haunted cabin, but this time it was with the rest of the gang. They had just settled down in the cabin for their afternoon tea. The flasks and cigarettes were out, and the men were just settling down for 10 minutes when suddenly the apparition entered. The ghost made his way to a corner that he had occupied before when I saw him, said Bill. I don't know if I had shown any signs on my face, but my ganger said, "It's all right, Bill. It's only Charlie come in for a warm." So I replied, "Yes. I've already met him once." That main line with the murder cabin has now been closed and taken up along with another one. Bill Whitehead and the gang moved when the line was closed, and he said, both lines are now no more, so I presume that the murder cabin has also gone along with the others. And he added, I was not unduly scared of the apparition because I believe that they mean no harm to anyone, only revisiting old places and acquaintances. Indeed. For train enthusiasts and ghost hunters, the lower branch line Stubbins to Walthamstow has recently reopened, so the ghost still has a line to walk. Removing the murder cabin would not remove the ghost. We started with ghost watch and ghost hunting, so let us end with a gold hunting story with a little mystery. There are many legendary tales of treasure, and we still have the mystery of Lake Toplitz in Austria. At the end of the Second World War, the Germans hid many boxes in the lake. They contained gold, jewelled ornaments from churches, forged English £5 notes and American $50 bills, and many, many documents that hold many war secrets. Many people have tried to retrieve the treasure, but it is very difficult, for the lake bed is completely covered with logs. A few years ago, an American naval team tried to get the boxes, but it was called off after 2 divers died on the lake bottom in very suspicious circumstances. A mystery, but let us get on with our gold hunting mystery. Chapter 31. The Lost Dutchman's Gold Mine. Arizona's Superstition Mountains hold the secret of the Lost Dutchman's gold mine, which was named after Dutch-born Jacob Waltz. Arizona is rich in legends. People existed throughout the area from about 25,000 BC, but the nomadic Apache and Navajo Indians arrived within only a few centuries of the Spanish invaders. Early Spanish invaders were also concerned in finding the fabled 7 golden cities. But by the 1840s, the land was virtually emptied after the Apaches took to the warpath. After the Mexican War, Arizona was ceded as part of New Mexico to the United States in 1848. But by the 1850s, the California gold brought prospectors into the area, but the Civil War allowed the Apache to keep the bloody war going in a lawless area. The legends were born with Indian leaders like Cochise and Geronimo, but the Indians did not stop those hell-bent on striking gold, and one such man was Jacob Waltz, who dreamed of finding the biggest gold mine. His dream came true when he and his prospecting partner befriended a Mexican who told Waltz about a rich gold mine that he and his family had found. Waltz eagerly listened as the little Mexican babbled out details about the mine and how they had to flee the mine when the Apache Indians took to the warpath, killing most of the prospectors. The Mexican was clearly afraid to return, but the seeds of wealth had been sown, and Waltz and his partner were soon burning with gold fever, which, by the way, is a real manifestation, peoples. I've had it from time to time. They soon persuaded the Mexican to return to the gold mine and that they would ride with him to protect him with their guns. After a difficult journey, the 3 men reached the gold mine deep in the Superstition Mountains. The arid land was fraught with many dangers, not only from the Apache, but also the deadly rattlesnake, the scorpion, and the Gila monster. I knew a monster named Gila too. That fucking bitch. One bite from any of them would be fatal. Yes, Davidson, you knew her well. They all colluded with Buck and my mother against me. Evil demon spawn, all of them, including you. I'm sorry. Too late now. Too late to be sorry. One bite from any of them would be fatal. Water was a priceless commodity. But the lust for gold was so great. Gila wanted Gisla's gold. The lust for gold was so great that Waltz soon had bags of gold and was preparing to return. Suddenly the Apaches attacked them, and they were so preoccupied with all the gold that they were caught unawares. Guarding the gold, Waltz looked for the Mexican, but he had completely disappeared, leaving behind his bag of gold. With one hand clutching the bags of gold, Waltz fired at the Apaches. As the smoke cleared, the Dutchman saw his partner lay dying, and while the Apaches prepared to attack again, Waltz managed to escape to safety. But in his hurry, he had lost much of his gold. Word soon spread about the rich gold mine, and the Dutchman was hounded day and night for information about the mine. Waltz refused to say where the mine was, vowing that he would go back for more gold. But he died of pneumonia before he had the chance to do so. He took his secret to the grave. However, he did leave some clues as to the gold mine's whereabouts. One was that the mine was in a canyon and in sight of Weaver's Needle, the name given to a strange peak. Also, Waltz had repeatedly said that no one on horseback would ever find the gold mine, for the country was too inaccessible. One could only get to it on foot, for the step-like escarpments were very rugged. In the 1870s and 80s, settlers began to take root in the area as ranches and towns finally spread into former Indian territory. During this period, the gold seekers searched the hills and rumours were rife about the lost Dutchman's gold mine. Then in 1880, 2 soldiers stumbled into the assay office with handfuls of gold nuggets. Let's go, babies. Claiming to have found the lost Dutchman's gold mine. The 2 soldiers babbled on about the gold mine and of gold beyond their wildest dreams. After a few days' rest and replenished with supplies, the 2 soldiers set off back to the gold mine. They were never seen again. They should have kept their mouths shut, shouldn't they? And the secret of the lost Dutchman's gold mine disappeared with them. It is said that their voices can be heard on the wind around the Superstition Mountains. Over the years, hundreds of people have tried to find the rich gold mine of Jacob Waltz, and dozens have perished in the attempt. All those who were found were all headless. It was said their last cries were borne on the winds of the Superstition Mountains to warn others not to follow. But gold fever is hard to shake off, and one to catch gold fever and who tried to find the lost Dutchman's gold mine was James Cravey. In 1947, he went by helicopter to the Superstition Mountains. After unloading his supplies, he set off on foot to search for the Dutchman's gold mine, but within days he was dead. When James Cravey's skeleton was found, it was without its head. And at the time it was discovered, voices could be heard in the wind. The lost Dutchman's gold mine has never been found, and the mysterious deaths have never been explained. Many people think that Jacob Waltz is still guarding the secret of his gold mine. Some people think the gold mine was destroyed in an earthquake that shook the Arizona regions in the 80s. But many think the gold mine was filled in by the Apache Indians, Evidence of this comes from a prospector who, in 1912, was told by an old Apache that he knew where the gold mine was. The Indian told the prospector that the mine had been filled in sometime during the late 1880s by the squaws of the tribe. After the mine had been filled in, the surface was smoothed over to wipe away all traces. Only the wind knows the secret, and occasionally the voices are heard in the wind, keeping alive the legend of the lost Dutchman's gold mine. Do the ghostly winds in Arizona's ghost towns hold the key? Is the answer blowing in the wind? Of course it is, my darling. All answers blow in the wind. The truth will always remain the truth, and I will always find out in the end about all things, especially things concerning my love life. So, is the answer blowing in the wind, or is it all in the mind? Does the Cartolino Spirito hold the answer? The reproduction shown above is negative. Look at the 3 dots on the nose for 60 seconds without blinking, then stare at the ceiling, preferably a white one, or the wall, to see the positive. Or is it the photographic image they have been talking about? Keep looking until the image appears. So there you have it. Ghosts, ghouls, mystery, superstition, strange paranormal events, including my own personal visitations from former dead lovers who did me no bloody good at all. The missing word that no one mentioned, not even the experts, is faith. You must have faith. Faith in what you are doing, faith in your old dog, whatever. You need faith. So, be it ghost hunting or gold hunting, have faith and good hunting. Buona fortuna, the end. What a lovely way to end this book, wishing us good luck. So on that note, the time is now 8:11 p.m. on the 28th of April. Someone's getting very twittery and excited behind me, but I'm not going to open up to him to converse with him because nothing really more to be said, people of Earth. Sometimes silence really is golden. I'm winding him up. I talk to him whenever I feel like it. But anyway, I don't open up to him lightly though, because as you can see, it can be a pain in my ass. And I need a real man of the flesh and blood and sinew and intellect and emotions to be a partner to me, not some dead man who really did me no good at all. Just so. And yes, I'll leave it at that, shall we? It's a beautiful life, even for the Tanya and her weird solitary existence, but excuse me, I'm very happy I got to spend some time with my friend's little granddaughter today and did my heart good. And there's all kinds of love out in the world, people of Earth, that is just as real and authentic and sweet and ennobling. In my life, it doesn't generally come from sexual partners or those that proclaimed in weird little ways that they were thinking about being a sexual partner. It's all just unreality, and I don't live in unreality. For someone who communes with spirits, angels and fae on a regular basis, That sounds a bit strange, but when it comes to my sexuality, I need the real thing, people of Earth. Not Coca-Cola either, but oh, never mind. You have to giggle. It's all a bit funny when you think about it. Goddess bless, and have a beautiful evening wherever you are on planet Earth, and I'll carry on being bemused. Bye for now. Love to you all. Goddess bless.